As the Republican leadership fight becomes increasingly public, we're taking a closer look at Congresswoman Liz Cheney's apparent successor for GOP conference chair. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is poised to be the #3 Republican in the House, with the public support of Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. In 2014, she became the youngest female representative ever elected at age 30. Stefanik pulled off a rare feat, winning a district that twice voted for former President Obama. In 2016, she was slow to back then-candidate Trump for president. She declined to even say Mr. Trump's name and referred to him only as my party's nominee. So how did she go from that to this?
President Trump has fought tirelessly to deliver results for all Americans, despite the Democrats' baseless and illegal impeachment sham and the media's endless obsession with it. I was proud to lead the effort standing up for the Constitution, President Trump, and most importantly, the American people.
Philip Klinkner joins me now. He is a professor of government at Hamilton College in New York. Professor, welcome. Thanks very much for being with us. So Georgetown University ranked Congresswoman Stefanik in the top 3% of most bipartisan members of Congress last session. So how did she become one of former President Trump's staunchest defenders?
Well, I think it's two things. One is her district shifted very heavily from Democratic to Republican. Obama won it by 6 points in 2012. Trump won it in 2016 by about 14 points. That's a 20-point swing, and that's huge. And any member of Congress is going to follow their district, and when it moves that fast, that far, they're going to move with it. The other thing is, I think it shows that the new Trump Republican Party really doesn't have much ideological content. It used to be that Republicans were about less government, lower taxes. They still say those things, but obviously the number one sort of litmus test in the Republican Party now is not about policy, it's about President Trump and whether you support him or not. And so I think it's really doesn't matter what your voting record is like, since she has a fairly moderate one for a Republican. It really matters what really matters is how strongly you support Donald Trump.
Nevertheless, Congressman Chip Roy from the conservative House Freedom Caucus has sent a letter to fellow Republicans criticizing Stefanik, saying in part, quote, "We must avoid putting in charge Republicans who campaign as Republicans, but then vote for and advance the Democrats' agenda once sworn in. That is, that we do not make the same mistakes that we did in 2017. So what do you make of that kind of criticism? Because in Chip Roy, you have someone who is also supportive of President Trump, now pointing to a record that he says does not comport with conservative values.
Well, I think Chip Roy's an interesting case. As you point out, he's very, very conservative on a number of policy questions, but he was also very critical of President Trump with the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. He criticized those Republicans who voted not to certify President Biden's election in the Electoral College. And while he did not vote to impeach President Trump, he did say that President Trump's conduct on January 6th was, in fact, impeachable. He just thought that the time had sort of run out for that. So I don't think Chip Roy really sort of represents where the most conservative members of the Republican caucus are headed these days. Others in the Freedom Caucus haven't spoken out yet. They may, but so far they haven't. So even for most members of the Freedom Caucus, it's not about ideology. It's not about where you stand on taxes or government or regulation. It's about where you stand on Donald Trump.
Well, when asked about the possibility of replacing Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Elise Stefanik told the Washington Examiner she felt Cheney prioritized an individual message, quote, rather than prioritizing the message of the conference. So, Professor, how does that square with Congresswoman Stefanik's record of governance?
Well, I think they're getting into semantics here. It's clear that whatever they're saying, Liz Cheney was very opposed to not only President Trump challenging the election results earlier this year, was deeply, deeply critical of the role he played in the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. And it wasn't about her messaging. Maybe if she had sort of kept quiet and hadn't mentioned this, but she kept bringing the issue up. But it was pretty clear that Donald Trump has had it out for her since early January when she voted to impeach him. So I think whatever Liz Cheney might have said or not said over the last couple of months, it was clear that she was going to face another test of leadership. Maybe it wouldn't have come as quickly. Maybe it wouldn't have been quite as successful. We'll see exactly how it turns out. But I think this was something that was coming regardless of whatever Liz Cheney had done in the last couple of months. This was sort of set in stone back in January.
Well, let's take a step back for a moment. As we mentioned, Congresswoman Stefanik flipped New York's 21st district. A Democrat had held that seat for nearly 2 decades. So how did she do that, and what is her reputation among her constituents?
She did it by running as a moderate Republican. Even though it was a district that was held by Democrats, it tended towards Republicans in recent years, even though President Obama did carry it in 2012. And she's actually become more popular with her constituents. Her vote percentage went up between 2018 and 2020. So in the 2 years in which she went from being somewhat critical of President Trump to being one of his staunchest supporters, she actually saw an increase in her vote. So it hasn't hurt her in the district. She hasn't won by overwhelming margins. She gets about 55% of the vote. But it's a district that definitely supports her.
Well, Stefanik has defied her party in a few areas. She voted with Democrats on bills ranging from climate change to LGBTQ rights. What have been some of her defining political issues?
Well, the thing is that she wasn't a particularly well-known figure in Congress. She was notable only for the fact that she was the youngest woman elected to the House back in 2014 when she got elected. But she was basically a backbencher from upstate New York. She didn't represent a major media market. She probably would have sort of languished in the House for a number of years. But by becoming a sort of full-throated defender of President Trump during his impeachment in 2019, she was able to sort of vault herself into the upper ranks of the Republican leadership. And I think there's a lesson here that if you want to get ahead in the Republican Party, if you want to get ahead, especially in the House, as a Republican, the way to do it is by aligning yourself very, very closely with President Trump. Her success has come not because she's a skillful legislator, because she has policy expertise, because she's particularly media savvy or telegenic, or she sort of advances Republican goals. Her advancement is strictly about her ability to be an effective defender of President Trump.
Before we let you go, Elise Stefanik has reportedly pledged to her colleagues to only serve 1 term if elected to GOP conference chair. So, Professor, what might that say about her political ambitions?
Who knows? My guess is that she, as most people in Congress do, have larger political ambitions. I think it'd be very hard for her to step away if Republicans actually gain a majority in the House in the 2022 election. She would be chief whip of the Republican majority. She would have a huge role. But on the other hand, she may choose to run for the Senate or for governor of New York at some point, although that's a tough stretch, being as how Democratic New York State is. Perhaps she even wants to run for president. So I'd be interested to see if she actually holds to that pledge.
Professor Philip Klinkner, thank you very much.
Thank you.